So hello, welcome to the Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant Program informational webinar. We're glad to be hosting this session and thank you for joining us today. First, I hope everyone's able to see the screen, and then we just went through all of our technical difficulties of being able to confirm that everyone can hear us. So again, thanks for sticking with us through that. So if everything is in working order, we're going to go ahead and get ready to jump into this. And I'm going to formally introduce myself. I'm Laura Merrick. I'm the Communications and Grants Administration Assistant in the City of Dubuque's Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs. And also joining us is Jenny Peterson Brandt, the City of Dubuque's Arts and Cultural Affairs Manager, who we were heard from at the very beginning and helped us through our technical difficulties. So we're happy to be your guides through this educational session and serve as an ongoing resource afterwards. Before we dive in, I want to share a few housekeeping items. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and it will be accessible via a link posted to the Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant Overview page in the Arts and Culture Department section of the city's website. The documents referenced throughout the webinar, such as the notice of funding, terms and conditions, application questions, scoring matrix, and instructions on how to verify or register for a unique entity identifier with sam.gov can be found in the handout section. Additionally, a PDF of the slides from this webinar and the documents I just have mentioned are going to be available and actually are available on the Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant Overview web page. You can find this page by going to thecityofdubuque.org, clicking on Doing Business in the top menu, selecting Arts and Culture under the Learn About Dubuque section, then click on the funding programs in the left side menu, followed by the NEA Local Arts Agency Subgranting information, and then finally on the Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant Overview page. As the Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant Awards are federal funds, there are additional terms that we need to meet. Therefore, applicants must be prepared to comply with flow down federal regulations and policy requirements as outlined in the notice of funding and the Appendix C documents. So I'm going to reiterate a number of times throughout this webinar how important those documents are and being able to access them and review them to make sure that you are able to be in compliance with those. So please feel free to enter questions anytime in the question box. We'll be monitoring the questions that come throughout the webinar. We may choose to respond to the questions in the question section as they come up if they're easily answered, or we may decide to table them to address in the Q&A portion at the end of the session. Additionally, if questions are best addressed offline after the session, we'll take note and we'll be sure to follow up with you on that. So we've got a lot to cover today and we'll go ahead and get started. So first, we're just going to look at these topics that we'll be touching on as we move through this webinar. We'll begin with reviewing the purpose of this opportunity and important dates. We'll go over eligibility requirements, talk about funding guidelines, hit on rating criteria and scoring, highlight key steps in the application process, touch on notable review and awards process, and we'll share some helpful contacts and resources. And we'll wrap up with the Q&A period. At the end, again, please insert any questions as they arise in the question box. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the NEA source of funds for this opportunity, or to serve as a refresher for others, on November 18th, 2021, the City of Dubuque's Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs announced receipt of a $500,000 award from the National Endowment for the Arts, Local Arts Agency Subgranting Program supported by the American Rescue Plan Act to help the arts sector recover from the pandemic. The awarded funding was allocated into two funding programs. The majority of the award is directed to the new Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant Program that supports the arts operations of eligible local nonprofit organizations in saving jobs, funding operations and facilities, health and safety supplies, and marketing and promotional efforts to encourage attendance and participation. Additionally, the award provides funding for the creation of a soon-to-be-developed pilot program to support individual creatives in art-based projects that further their career and deepen their community engagement. As Ann Eilers, NEA's acting chair at the time, shared, these grants recognize the vital role of local arts agencies and will allow them to rebuild local economies and contribute to the well-being of our communities. Today, we are focused on the Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant Program. This is a one-time limited funding opportunity made possible through the National Endowment for the Arts via the American Rescue Plan Act resources. The City of Dubuque is serving as a local arts agency by subgranting $435,000 in federally awarded funds. The purpose of the Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant Program is to assist Dubuque's nonprofit arts activities in response to economic and community impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, with funding only to be distributed to support day-to-day operating costs of the arts, arts education, arts activities, and/or arts experiences facilitated by eligible organizations. An intention of this opportunity is to broaden the investment in Dubuque's art sector by engaging with vital community organizations that the Office of Arts and Culture Affairs historically hasn't done due to funding restrictions. Therefore, eligible organizations are not necessarily needing to be dedicated to the arts. Still, they are required to operate within Dubuque city limits and demonstrate a commitment to serving the community through arts, arts education, arts activities, and/or artistic experiences. As shared earlier, we'll dive deeper into these topics, such as eligibility and allowable costs noted in the purpose that we just discussed. So let's now talk about some important dates that you'll want to keep on your calendar as the Arts Operating Recovery Program advances. Friday, December 16th. This is a critical date. Applications are due by 11:59 p.m. Applications are accepted only via Slide Room, which is the online portal system that hosts the application and facilitates the reviewing and reporting functions of the process. In early January 2023, applications will be reviewed by an assembled volunteer grant reviewer panel, guided by the scoring matrix we will cover a little bit later. The end of January and into February, the funding recommendations informed by the grant reviewer, scores, and discussion with staff then flows to the Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission. It'll be presented to them for consideration and approval, and then move on to the city manager and city council for final approval. February brings us to sending out award notifications and the release of the award agreement. In March, we'll be collecting the signed agreements and invoices from those organizations awarded funds. Once all documents and any outstanding eligibility requirements, for example, perhaps securing a unique entity identifier, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit later in the webinar, are in place, then we'll proceed with submitting invoices for payment and dispersing 100% of the awarded funds. Let's see, so please note that the period of performance is the calendar year of January 1 through December 31st of 2023, with the period of performance being defined as the time frame in which the arts operating expenses that the subgrant is supporting are incurred. So let's spend some time talking about eligibility. Organizations must meet the eligibility criteria to advance into the competitive review stage. As was mentioned earlier, the eligibility criteria differs from the annual Arts and Cultural Operating Support Grant Program. When it comes to the Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant opportunity, eligible organizations do not necessarily need to be dedicated to the arts. However, they are required to operate within Dubuque city limits and demonstrate a commitment to serving the community through access to arts, arts education, arts activities, and/or artistic experiences. You'll notice that I'm saying arts, arts education, arts activities, and arts experiences often. This is intentional, as we want to reinforce that arts is the focus of this funding. This is because Congress envisioned the aid received via the National Endowment for the Arts American Rescue Plan to support the arts community. Therefore, the funds must be allocated to the arts program, department, section, office, or arts-related activities of the subgrant recipient. If you're wondering whether your organization or program within your organization aligns with this mandate, please reach out to us and we'll explore alignment possibilities together with you offline. So we're going to look a little bit more at the criteria that are outlined on this current slide. Up first, we have Dubuque-based nonprofit organization headquartered and or operating within the city limits of Dubuque since at least March 17th, 2020. In this context, headquartered is interpreted as an organization being centered in the city of Dubuque, providing services within Dubuque city limits, and yet may provide services outside of Dubuque through other satellite location or organization connected infrastructure. Operating is defined as an entity with a physical base and a focused service area within the city of Dubuque. The March 17th, 2020 date is significant, as it is the date that the governor of Iowa issued the proclamation of public health disaster emergency in response to COVID-19, and these funds are specific to aiding the recovery of economic and community impacts due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The next bullet point is addressing the unique entity identifier, or UEI requirement. Organizations must have a valid UEI, which was previously a DUNS number, to receive federal funding. If the organization doesn't have a UEI, the organization can still apply, but a UEI must be provided to the city's Arts and Cultural Affairs Office before funds, if awarded, are to be dispersed. For a guide on how to verify if your organization has a UEI or to learn about how to obtain a UEI, please see the document titled COD NEA SAM UEI in the handouts. I am not an expert on the SAM.gov system, but I am certainly available to be a resource, and I'm happy to assist anyone through the process in whatever ways that I can. The next criteria is fairly straightforward. To be eligible as an organization, to be eligible, an organization must be recognized as a tax-exempt 501c3 with ongoing public-facing arts programs, departments, sections, offices, or arts-related activities that is either a nonprofit organization with dedicated arts programs as all or part of their mission. An example of such could be a nonprofit organization offering public-facing studio classes as the core of their work, or a nonprofit organization offering public-facing studio classes as a subset of their work in, say, after-school programming. Or they can be a standalone non-academic units, venues within institutions of higher education. An example of this might be a non-academic community theater program within a college community programming. What is critical to note is that your organization or program within your organization is recognized as either of these, and information on or a demonstration of an arts-only operating budget will need to be provided as part of the application to justify your funding ask amount. And then on this slide, we're going to look at the additional eligibility considerations. Current awardees of the City of Dubuque's Operations Support and/or Special Project Grant and applicants that will apply for the fiscal year 24 grant cycle are eligible to apply. The next four criteria are inclusive of being in compliance to the federal regulations and policy requirements via the flow down of federal funds. So applicants receiving American Rescue Plan funds from other sources may only apply for specific operating support not already covered by other federal funds. In other words, the proposed expenses and expenditure timeline indicated in your application may not overlap with any other American Rescue Plan or federal funds provided by an agency other than the City of Dubuque. All applicants must verify that they are not excluded or disqualified from doing business with the federal government. In support of this, we request that organizations complete a self-certification that participants are in the award are not disbarred, suspended, or have other exclusions or disqualifications. There is a link provided in the notice of funding to a site where a self-certification can be performed. Additionally, organizations need to agree to abide by the NEA's non-discrimination, environmental and preservation, and other national policies. All of the applicable policies can be found in the Appendix C document. A link to Appendix C is available in the Arts Operating Recovery Overview webpage and in the Notice of Funding. A policy I want to bring to your attention under this criteria point is per Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. Applicants initiating art projects in locations eligible for or listed on the National Register of Historic Properties must identify that intention Therefore, any public art operations the Arts Operating Recovery Fund support must comply and be approved by the City of Dubuque and the National Endowment for the Arts for its potential impact on the historic properties, districts, sites, and the environment to fulfill responsibilities and obligations under the National Historic Preservation Act and the National Environment Policy Act, respectively. Subgrants for public art projects will be considered pending until all parties have fully approved the specific operations. There is a link in the application to learn more about the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. So please reference this link when completing the application if it is believed the arts operating funds being requested are tied to such a project.
Laura, I'm going to jump in. Hi, everybody. This is Jenny. As Laura's talking about these documents that she's referring to, the ones that you can find on the website, they are also available in the handout section in the GoToWebinar control panel today. So you can find those handouts, those PDFs being available for download right there if you haven't already grabbed them from the website.
Perfect. Thanks, Jenny. And the last point that we need to talk about under the organization eligibility is that an organization must meet or be willing to meet accessibility requirements by having a Section 504 accessible workbook on file. Federal policies require that organizations must be accessible to people with disabilities to receive funding. By having a Section 504 self-evaluation workbook on file, the workbook is available at the link in the application and in the notice of funding. If an organization doesn't have a Section 504 self-evaluation workbook on file, the organization may still apply, but if awarded funds, the organization will need to complete, submit to the Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs, and keep the Section 504 self-evaluation workbook on file before funds are dispersed. And then this slide, we're looking at what are the criteria for an ineligible organization. So ineligible entities include individuals, for-profit organizations or businesses, nonprofit organizations whose primary mission is focused on religious, political, or athletic activities, public and private schools that serve grades pre-K through 12, academic departments or non-art units within institutions of higher education, organization that uses a fiscal agent or a tax-exempt status of another organization, and organizations with an outstanding final report associated with previous grant awards from fiscal year 22 or prior from the Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs funding opportunities. So I'm just going to take a pause here and we'll see if there's any questions that are coming up that need to be addressed right now.
Laura, we have no questions in the question box at this time.
No questions, all right. All right, so we are moving on to funding guidelines. So this is what you need to know about the funding guidelines. The total funds to be dispersed through the Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant Program is $435,000. Funding requests are capped at 50% of the organization's arts operating budget, not to exceed $25,000. This is an example of where the information on or demonstration of the arts-only operating budget will need to be provided. So for example, if your organization's arts operating budget is $15,000, your max request is going to be $7,500. If your organization's arts operating budget is greater than $50,000, the max request is $25,000. Please remember that this is a competitive opportunity. Funding levels will be impacted by the number of eligible applicants and how applicants score. While applications may request the maximum award amount, final awards may be less than requested. And applications with the lowest score may not be recommended for funding. We also are looking at that there's no match required and that funds, and this is really important to keep in mind, funds only cover allowable expenses incurred during the period of performance. And again, that's January 1st through December 31st of 2023. So looking at allowable costs are limited to costs that fall into one or more of these outlined cost categories and are directly incurred by the general operating of the arts education, arts activities, and/or artistic experiences of the organization. So the first allowable cost we're looking at is salary support, full or partial for one or more staff positions. Subgrant funds may be applied to support salaries or wages for one or more jobs, including existing and new jobs or restoring jobs that were furloughed or eliminated due to the pandemic that are dedicated to the general operations of the arts activities of the organizations. Institutions of higher education are eligible to apply to support jobs whose main function is providing or supporting public programming, but funds cannot be used to support academic positions. Fees, stipends for artists and/or contractual personnel for services they provide for specific activities or services. These activities or services must be part of the organization's regular day-to-day work in support of the organizational mission and cannot be for a new or special project or program. Costs associated with the health and safety supplies for staff and/or visitors/audiences, for example, personal protective equipment, cleaning supplies, hand sanitizer, etc. Please note that these are the only supplies that can be funded through this subgrant. We're also looking at facility costs such as rent and utilities, for example, electric, phone, and/or gas bills, costs related to home offices, upgrades to HVAC ventilation system, and other capital improvements are not allowable. We are also another allowable cost that is on the list is marketing and promotion costs. And then lastly, we have indirect costs. If you apply for indirect costs, your organization is going to need to either have an approved indirect cost rate negotiated with the federal government, which can be used, or if no rate exists, a de minimis indirect cost rate of up to 10% of a modified direct total cost can be used. For example, overhead, administrative, or general operating expenses that are not readily identifiable with or are difficult to assign to a specific project, but nevertheless are necessary to the operation of the organization, the performance of its activities, and the execution of its projects is kind of a general overarching definition of indirect costs. So an example I think we may all be related or can relate to is office supplies. So these supplies are essential to effectively running an organization and are applied to multiple activities occurring and which therefore can't be assigned to a specific project. So that would be an example of an indirect cost. And so here are a few examples of allowable costs. There's a museum contract with security guards for ongoing protection of the collection, a regular function of the museum's operations. An organization hires contracts with IT experts to address its website as part of an ongoing marketing and promotion, which is an allowable cost, or to upgrade technology to improve virtual engagement. Another example is an arts education organization whose day-to-day work is developing and presenting educational programs, contracts with a teaching artist to design or deliver a program. And then finally, we have an organization hires/contracts tech support to carry out its ongoing virtual activities in response to COVID-19, including individuals to provide expertise in the areas of staging, lighting, or sound. What you'll notice in each of these examples is the use of ongoing and day-to-day in relation to the arts operations. Referring back to these examples will be helpful as you consider what funds you'll allocate and to what allowable costs in the upcoming form that we'll discuss, which is the Arts Operating Recovery Request Form. And when we're looking at that, it will just be helpful to keep these examples in mind to help inform that as part of the organization's application. If you have specific questions related to allowable costs, please feel free to reach out to us so that we can address them with you. And lastly, under our funding guidelines, we have unallowable costs. So this is a fairly comprehensive list of unallowable costs. Please review and familiarize yourself with it. Knowing what costs are not allowed will be helpful as your organization considers which arts operating costs to request funds for. And then we're just going to see if there's any questions about our funding guidelines, but I'm not seeing any.
Yes, we have no questions
All
in
right,
the question box,
We'll
Laura.
just keep moving forward. All right, so we're on to scoring categories. Here we go. All applications are initially assembled and scrutinized for eligibility and completeness. Applications that pass the screening are then assigned to trained volunteer grant reviewers. The reviewers will use the matrix we'll go over as the guide to score the arts operating recovery applications. The scoring matrix is not part of the application. It is for informational purposes only. However, it is highly encouraged that as responses to application questions are being crafted, that the scoring prompts, weights, and criteria are kept in mind to create a strong application. Additionally, please be aware that reviewers are not necessarily familiar with your organization, its work, or the Dubuque community, so be conscientious in your responses. Be descriptive and try to avoid including specific jargon or using acronyms without first defining them. When it comes to scoring applications, they're being assessed in 5 categories. We have statement of need, artistic excellence, artistic merit, organizational oversight, and it's organizational oversight and fiscal competence. And then finally, we have diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Each category has a max of 3 points. Total points are determined on a scale of 1 being the lowest and 3 being the highest, on which the reviewer will rate responses. Applications are scored on their own individual merit, and the scores are not necessarily a reflection or evaluation of the organization and its work, but rather an assessment of how well the responses pointedly address the application questions and the applicant's ability to convey to the reviewer a complete and informed picture in support of the ask. While points are defined per scoring category, in general, a 1 is an unsatisfactory or lacking response, a 2 equals a meeting or moderately addressed response, and 3 equals a exceedingly or strongly supported response. Additionally, I want to point out that the applications will be scored on a weighted scale. Applications must be reviewed for artistic merit and artistic excellence as a requirement of the National Endowment for the Arts. To recognize this, both artistic categories carry more weight than the other categories. While we encourage you to put your organization's best foot forward in all categories, it is especially important to do so in these artistic categories, remembering that this is a competitive opportunity. So let's look into, let's jump into looking at the rating criteria in each of these scoring categories. I'm going to move through these kind of fast because all of this information is readily available in the handouts as well as online. And I know we have a lot more content to be going through before we wrap up our webinar. So the first one we're looking at under the rating criteria is the statement of need. The key things to note here are the weight assigned to it, which is 10%. The questions in the application, which fall into the proposal section that directly align with it, are questions 1 and 2. And then we have the reviewer prompt. So these are what the reviewers will be using to prompt their decision making. So does the organization present a clear case for need as how the funds will support day-to-day arts focused operating expenses? Is the proposed use of funds evident and appropriate? And then you'll see under the scoring matrix that there are different descriptions, and those descriptions are aligning to the point system, but then also directly to the question. So the upper or the top line is going to relate to the question 1. So describe the need of the arts operations recovery funding related to the organization's arts activities. Would then have the scoring looked at as number 3 would be the statement of need is fully communicated and supported. 2 is equal to a statement of need is moderately supported, and 1, the need for funds is not well demonstrated. The next category we're looking at is the artistic excellence. Key things to note here again are the weight that is assigned to it. It's 25%. The questions in the proposal section of the application that directly align with it are questions 3 and 4. And again, we've outlined here the reviewer prompt that will be utilized and then the scoring system for the artistic excellence. Our next rating criteria section is looking at is the artistic merit. Again, key things to look at here is the weight assigned to it, 25%. The questions in the application's proposal section that relate directly to it are questions 5 and 6. Again, we've laid out what the reviewer prompts are for it and the scoring definitions. Here we have the organization oversight and fiscal competence. We're looking at a 20% weight assigned to this category. And the question, there's a single question in this, in the proposal section of the application, and that's question 7. Please note that we're also going to be considering in this the Arts Operating Recovery Request form and the Arts Operating Budget History form, which we'll touch on a little bit later here in the webinar. Again, we've included what the reviewer prompts are and the scoring criteria. And then our final category is diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. The weight on this is 20%. The question that aligns within the application's proposal section is question 8. Again, we're outlining what the reviewer prompt is and sharing what those scoring criteria are. Let's see again. Yeah, so do we have any questions on the scoring matrix or rating criteria?
I do not see any questions in our chat.
Perfect. All right. So then we're going to move on to looking at how is best approach to submitting an application. So we understand that the application process can be an undertaking. So in this slide and the following slides, we're going to be sharing some important details, tips, and application insights into how to get support and how we can help streamline the process for you. So applications must be submitted no later than 11:59 p.m. on Friday, December 16th, 2022. This is strictly enforced. Applications must be submitted online via SlideRoom at thecityofdubuque.slideroom.com. You'll need to create a SlideRoom account if you don't already have one, but accounts are free as well as submissions are free. Late, incomplete, or ineligible applications will not be accepted. Likewise, changes or the addition of materials to an application after the submission deadline will not be accepted unless requested by city staff. The applicant, not city staff, is solely responsible for the content and timely submission of this grant. As the Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant awards are federal funds, applicants must be prepared to comply with the flow-down federal regulations and policy requirements as outlined by the Notice of Funding and Appendix C documents. Please carefully review the eligibility, allowable costs, reporting requirements, and terms and conditions before completing the application. So here's a few tips and tricks that we think are helpful. A downloadable PDF of the application questions is available. It's going to be available on the SlideRoom site, as well as it's available on the website, the city's website. And it's also available in the handouts. So you have multiple points of access for that. Answers are limited to maximum character counts, which include spaces. Log into SlideRoom to start an application to see the character count assigned to the individual questions. Attach only requested attachments, being mindful of requested document length. Keep artistic excellence and artistic merit, as well as community outcomes and impact of art activities front and center. When we're talking about helping the process of submitting an application, we are committed to making our programs and services accessible to everyone. So please reach out to me to request any form of accommodation. My contact information is listed here. I'm mostly accessible by email, but feel free to reach out to me via email or the number, and I will get back to you typically within 48 hours between Monday and Friday. We are also offering, in addition to today's informational webinar, our virtual office hours to allow applicants to connect directly with staff about program guidelines or the application process. These will be hosted on Tuesday, November 22nd from 6 to 7 p.m., Tuesday, November 29th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., and Tuesday, December 6th from 6 o'clock to 7 p.m. So the virtual office hours are listed on the Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant Overview webpage. To join the virtual office hours session, you just need to visit that page and then click on the link for that the session that you wish to attend, and then you'll be joined in with us to be able to discuss any questions you might have. If you're having technical difficulties with SlideRoom, please reach out to them. But if you have any questions regarding the application or how to navigate it, please reach out to me and I'll be as helpful as I can be. So now we're going to look at some helpful steps about accessing all the relevant information to prepare for applying. So we're looking here at the cityofdubuque.org. We're going to be clicking on the Doing Business in the upper menu and then clicking on the Arts and Culture tab, and this is going to direct us to then navigate to the funding programs in the left side menu. Following that, we're going to go to the NEA Local Arts Agency Subgranting Information tab, and then finally on the Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant Overview. And once we get there, then we'll see a listing of all relevant documents in support of applying, as well as the links to the SlideRoom to access the application. I'm just going to say this again, as the Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant awards are federal funds, applicants must be prepared to comply with flow down federal regulations and policy requirements as outlined by the notice of funding and the Appendix C documents. So please carefully review the eligibility, allowable costs, reporting requirements, and terms and conditions before completing the application. You can find all of this information in these links on the website, as well as in the handouts. And there's also reference to them in the application with the applicable links. You can also directly access the Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant application by going to the cityofdubuque.slideroom.com website. Once you're there, if you just click on the Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant, you'll be dropped right into the application. Again, it's just highly recommended that you carefully review all of the eligibility, allowable cost reporting requirements, and terms and conditions before completing the application. We're going to continue to go through a number of things regarding the application. So I wanted to just reiterate that again. And I also want to restate that SlideRoom is free to use. However, you'll need to either use an existing account or create an account to start the application. The application consists of 4 parts. It's got forms, attachments, a media section, and then you have the ability to submit once you've fully completed all those sections. So we're going to look at those sections here. So once you've created your login, if you need to, or you have accessed the application via your existing login, then you'll be directed to advance through the 6 required forms, the attachments, and the portfolio sections before submitting. So the 6 forms include a contact information section, an eligibility information, an organizational summary, proposal, financials, and assurances. Then you're going to be looking at the attachment section. So we've got evidence of the 501c3 is one of our attachments. So this is where you're going to provide the organization's most recent IRS issued 501c3 letter. We're asking for proof of approved indirect cost rate. This is if you are applying for indirect funds and the organization has an approved indirect cost rate negotiated with the federal government. We're also requesting a list of current paid staff and or key volunteers. So we're in that document, we'd like you to include name, job title, and applicable areas of artistic or administrative expertise for each person involved in the leadership or management of the organization, and limit this to 1 page when possible. We're also asking for a list of current board of directors, so include the name, officer role if applicable, term, expiration date, and major affiliations outside of the organization. In addition, include a brief statement of how board positions are filled. Again, we're asking you to limit it to 1 page when possible. The portfolio is a sample of the organization's work. One portfolio piece is required, but you can add up to 5. So this is where we're asking to submit a high quality media sample, such as a musical recording, image of artwork, testimonial, short video clip. Examples should demonstrate the kind of arts programming the organization does and or its impact on the community. And we have a disclosure statement about how items may be used by the city for promotional purposes. It is understood that appropriate releases have been secured in providing these items and the copyright is waived. If credit is required for any of the uploaded items, please provide that in the media description. Ensure that appropriate viewing permissions are given. Several options can be found online if you need to reduce file size. This is important as we really want to be champions of the work that is being funded through the Arts Operating Recovery, and so we want to make sure that we have great samples to be able to share with the rest of the community. One thing you'll note as you're working through the application and going through the various sections of the application is that slide room will notify you of any incomplete areas. So you'll see on the screen that there's the red cautionary triangle. It's telling you what area is having the issue. So the finance form is having some complications, and then you'll see that it's telling you that you need to complete some certain sections. So this is very helpful as you're stepping through this application to have slideshow be able to indicate to you where you are missing information. You'll see also on the left-hand side where there's the green check boxes. So that just means that everything is good to go and that you've completed those sections. You do not need to complete you do not need to complete your application in one session, which is awesome. You can work on your application over time and you can complete the sections as the materials are ready. All you have to do is simply click on the save and exit as you are working through the application to save your most recent updates and return at a later time. So I certainly encourage anyone who is applying as they're going through the slide room application to navigate it in stages and be very conscientious about saving and exiting when you need to step away from it, and then it'll all be there when you come back.
Laura, can I interject? Can you go back to that slide?
Yes.
This is Jenny again. I was just going to add for folks that Laura pointing out the error pieces of it. You can, all of the errors, any of the red triangles with the exclamation points, those can, those all need to just be taken care of when you get to the actual wanting to submit the application and hit the submit button. But you can go ahead and save and exit the application with those error messages being in there in the application. They just need to all be resolved by the time you actually want to hit that submit button.
That's an excellent point. Thank you for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
So a little bit about what Jenny was just saying is that once you see all of the green check marks on the elements of the application, that means you are ready to submit. So you'll see on the left-hand side and on the top, like all of the sections have green check marks, so green is ready to go. So even though slide room is indicating your application is complete, please, please, please review your entire application before submitting to ensure that all the right responses and documents are included. And once you're confident that all those pieces are in the right place, then just go ahead and submit your application by clicking on the button and you'll be all set to go. And you'll get one of these great screens. It'll tell you success. Ta-da! Congratulations, you've successfully submitted your application. Do we have any questions about our
No, we
application
still have
section?
no questions.
Okay. So I referenced earlier the worksheets, the financial worksheets. So I just wanted to take a moment to look at those. As part of the application, you will be asked to prepare some financial worksheets. And there's two of them, but we're going to start with the first one, which is the Arts Operating Recovery Request Form. So this is an actual like side-by-side view of the Arts Operating Recovery Request Form. I just wanted to do that so we could kind of see it all in one screen and not have it be separated into multiple screens. So basically it's an organized breakdown of your funding amount request. Instructions are included on the worksheet, as well as descriptions of the allowable cost categories and sample content. To begin filling out the worksheet, you are asked to enter the name of the organization. So this should match the name on the application. You're going to enter the date range of fund utilization. So this is indicating the date range within the period of performance of January 1 through December 31st, 2023, that the requested funds are to be spent in. And then you're also going to be asked to provide a brief budget narrative on how the funds will be used. And then this is how you'll complete the rest of the Arts Operating Recovery Request Form. You'll enter into the form itemized eligible expenses by category that the requested Arts Operating Recovery Subgrant funds will cover, such as you could enter in full-time art teacher for a position title under the salary support section. You'll also need to include a brief description of each expense, current expenses for the position or category, projected proposed expenses, and the amount being requested that the Arts Operating Recovery funding will cover. We are asking you to round to the nearest dollar, and you will have the ability to add more rows under eligible expense sections as needed. The totals in each section will auto-calculate, as will the total costs. Please note that you do not need to fill in every line of this form. You only need to fill in the lines of the category or categories that correlate to and demonstrate the request that you're asking for. And then this is the second worksheet that I had mentioned earlier. This is the Arts Operating Budget History form. Again, instructions are provided in the worksheet. Basically, you're asked to enter in the total income and total expenses for fiscal year 2020, referencing back to the proclamation, March 17th, 2020, and the most recent completed fiscal year. The total income and the total expenses for the fiscal year figures should reflect income and expenses relevant to the arts operating budget only. If your organization is fully dedicated to the arts, then these figures could be the organization's overall budget. However, if your organization supports work outside of the arts, then the figures entered need to reflect the arts operating budget only. Do we have any questions from any folks?
We do have a question from Merlin that I think, Merlin, we're going to wait on your question till the end.
Okay. So we are just going to briefly touch on the review and awards process. Again, this is a competitive review. So funding levels will be impacted by the number of eligible applicants and how applicants score. While applicants may request the minimum award amount, the final award may be less than requested. Applications with the lowest scores may not be recommended for funding. So how this process works is first, the staff receives the applications and reviews each for completeness and compliance with eligibility requirements while providing updates to applicants and reviewers. Next, the applications move on to the review panel. These are volunteer grant reviewers composed of representatives independent of the Arts and Cultural Affairs Advisory Commission. I'm sorry, there's so many long words that just string together. And the city, and these will be reviewed by, I'm just going to start again. Next, applications will move on to the review panel. The volunteer grant reviewers are composed of representatives independent of the Arts and Cultural Affairs Advisory Commission and city staff. So these will be reviewed and scored, and the applications are going to again be guided by, the scoring on the applications is going to be guided by the scoring matrix that we covered earlier. Scores are then compiled by the staff and funding recommendations are presented to the Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission. The Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission then reviews the presented rankings and funding options and makes recommendations on the funding levels to the city manager and city council. City manager and city council review and approve or adjust the Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission's funding recommendations. So once we've gotten through all of that, then we circle back to the staff and we'll be sending out award notifications in February of 2023 with requests for the signed agreement and invoices. The award notification will provide further instructions on reporting and recognition requirements. Once all the documents and any outstanding eligibility requirements, as you remember, we talked earlier about the unique entity identifier, that you didn't have to have one at the time of applying, but if you do get awarded funds, we will need that before the funds are dispersed. So subgrants will be paid in full. That's 100% out to the organizations that it's awarded to, and subgrant funds must be used only for the purpose described in the proposal and incurred during the period of performance. We request any changes or modifications to the purpose be reported to the city of Dubuque in advance. And then lastly, staff manages the public announcements and media related to the subgrant awards. And that takes us through the review and awards process. And before we get to the Q&A section, just to review, we've got some helpful contacts and resources. Again, we're committed to making our programs and services accessible to everyone, so please feel free to reach out if you need an accommodation. My contact information is here, as well as Jenny's. We're both available to you. We've got the slide room technical support if you're having issues within the functionality of slide room. Go ahead and reach out to them, but if you just have questions on the application questions, please feel free to reach out to us to help you remediate those. And then we've got a listing of the resources, which we've already mentioned are in a variety of different places, but we have links here for them directly. Again, the notice of funding, the terms and conditions, acknowledgement, the UEI registration, the 504 accessibility form, the disbarred information, and Appendix C. These are all really valuable resources that you're going to want to have at your fingertips as you're navigating through the application. And then finally, we have our questions and answers section.
Excellent. Thanks, Laura, for all that great information and for all your great work on putting this program together for us. So there was a question submitted into to us that it's a fairly specific one, but I think we can answer it sort of generally for everyone. An organization that had received a cultural capacity building grant from the Iowa Arts Council. I know many of you are recipients of funding from the Iowa Arts Council. Receiving funds from them does not preclude you from also applying for this grant. You just need to ensure that any of the expenses that you're asking to be covered by their funding are not also something that is being asked to be covered by this NEA ARPA funding. So basically no double dipping in funds.
That was an excellent explanation.
Thanks. Any other questions from folks? Thanks, David, for your comment on the clear presentation. Again, Laura will be, having been registered for this, for the webinar, you will all get an auto follow-up email from GoToWebinar that will include access to the recording, and then we'll be posting the recording itself on the Arts and Culture section of the city's website, along with a PDF of these slides, so that you would have access to all those links that are hot linked in the presentation as Laura's put it together.
Perfect.
Any other questions?
Well, I see that we are just at an hour, so I'm impressed that we got through all of that.
And we were
so
even
fast.
late getting started because of technology.
Exactly. So I will just say thank you to everyone for joining us. We covered a lot today, so please feel free to reach out with any questions. We are here to support you. We look forward to receiving your applications. We're wishing you a safe and happy holiday next week if you're celebrating. And that's all from us for today.
Excellent.
So bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody. Bye. Have a great weekend.